My name is Kayla. I am the health promotion manager here at the cooperative, and we are just excited to have you here to talk about processed foods and your health. This is part of your Be Your Best health education series, and we are just really excited to dive in and look at all these different topics and just have these conversations for this. So just a couple notes before we get started. I will let you guys have your cameras stay off for this. So that means you can feel free to relax, enjoy your lunch, and just take in this information without having to worry about what you look like if you're eating or anything like that. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I do have the chat bar open. I will for sure address them after the session is all done. And then also too, at the end of the session, if you would like to, you can unmute your microphone, ask some specific questions. I also just want to put out there as well, if you have any more personal questions that you'd like to ask and don't feel comfortable asking them in front of the group, I will have my email address at the end of this presentation, and you can email me and then we'll get you connected with the help that you need. So let's get started, okay? Here we go. So today we're talking about, like I said before, processed foods and your health. And we're just going to go through a list of different things. This topic list, I realized as I was going through this earlier, this is a bit of a spoiler alert, but that's okay. So first what we're going to do is just put a definition to processed food. And then we're going to just go through some different ways to determine whether or not something is highly processed versus minimally processed. And then we're just going to talk about all the good benefits that we can eat by eating, or that we can get by eating the right foods. And then talk about some healthy foods to choose, and then just some tips and tricks to get by with, buying the minimally processed foods and just going through those healthy lifestyle behaviors. So let's dig in, shall we? So processed foods, okay? When you look into it, actually, there is this really big, kind of complex classification of processed foods. So we dug in and whittled it down and put it into two categories for you guys. So hopefully this is a little bit easier to digest, no pun intended, but it'll be something that we can just like look at a little bit differently, and hopefully is an easy distinction between what we should be eating in abundance and what we should just watch out for. So here's the thing, everything that we eat is processed to some degree. There's a process that's involved and it's touched by somebody to get from the farm to the table and all of that. So what we're going to be talking about today are two different categories. There are minimally processed foods, which are the foods that really have had minimal modifications from their natural state. They are going to provide all that wide range of essential nutrients that our bodies need to function optimally. And then there's the highly processed foods, and those are the foods that have gone extensive processing or have had modifications that just change their natural state. So they have maybe things like additives, preservatives, and artificial ingredients. And when it comes down to it, these foods tend to be more calorie dense, but nutrient poor. So they lack those essential vitamins and minerals and fiber that our bodies need. And then these are the foods that we're talking about when it comes to like regular consumption of these foods. That's what's associated with that increased risk of those various health issues like heart disease, diabetes, and certain types of cancer. Okay, so we're going to dig into it, go through each of these categories a little bit more specifically, and we'll just keep moving on. So how do we determine if food is highly processed? And there's a few different ways that we can look at it, okay? One is the things we kind of know already. It's looking at the brands that are more like well known for being associated with producing highly processed foods. So these are the things like we see, like that delicious Kraft mac and cheese that like is just touches our soul. But maybe if you really look at the ingredients list, has a lot of extra things in it that maybe we don't want to eat. But yeah, like things like Kraft and Nestle and Kellogg's with the sugary cereals, and PepsiCo. Actually, as I was researching for this presentation, PepsiCo not only has like sodas and juices and stuff like that, but they're also the owners of like Lay's chips and Doritos and Cheetos and all of that stuff too. So fun kind of little fact, I guess, about that. But so all those like snacky foods that we find in the snacky food aisle, and then also our fast food. So I singled out McDonald's, but other fast food chains and things like that too. So if you kind of just think about the branding that goes around food, any of these more well-known brands are something that we just want to be aware of, and how many of those are actually in our pantry, things like that. Now, giving a little bit more specific is look at that ingredient list. So all of the packaged foods that are sold in the store have to have an ingredient list and a nutrition label of some sort. So turn the package over and just make sure that you're looking at the actual ingredient list. And what you'll find with the highly processed food piece of it is just a lack of whole ingredients. So, and what I mean by that is like, it's not just like a cucumber or, something like that. It's something that's been pulled apart, and maybe it's been processed a little bit or broken down into a different state than what it is naturally. So a lack of whole ingredients. You're going to also find a lot of times that there's like artificial additives and maybe some added sugars, high sodium content, and then just a lengthy ingredient list, so to speak. So if you actually take a look at the ingredients list that we have for an example over here, it really depicts like all of that. So corn is in there, and actually that is a whole ingredient, I suppose, but that's number one. But then there's the vegetable oil, salt, cornstarch, all of that stuff. And then you start getting into these like words that we just don't really know, that are not part of our normal vocabulary, and like the monosodium glutamate and maltodextrin, and what else we got? Malic acid and all these artificial flavors and sodium acetate. Like, what is that? So all of this stuff. And then there's other like dyes and stuff in there that are added to make it colorful and beautiful. And then there's all these other things that are added in there to preserve it and make it tasty and last a long time, and all of that. So I'm just think for a moment. I want you to just like in your mind, just mentally guess what this is an ingredient list for, because it's actually one of those more common things that we find in our snacky food, especially like this time of year is like football season and stuff starts. So, okay. I hope you've had a time to guess if you're willing to guess. But this is actually Cool Ranch Doritos. So there's a lot going on with this little tasty treat that we have here. All right. Okay, so let's just kind of get into some of those highly processed foods that we should just limit. So we're not saying that you need to like completely take it out of your whole life, but just something that really, really need to be mindful of and make sure that we have a good balance with all the other good healthy foods. So we kind of picked on the prepackaged the prepackaged snacks already, but these are the things like potato chips, crackers, cookies, candy bars, other snacky foods that you find in that lovely aisle. Really what it comes down to is these things are typically high in added sugar, unhealthy fats, and artificial flavors. Those sugary cereals that our kids just love to eat way more than the unsugary cereals, they really are heavily processed and just loaded with refined grains, sugars, and artificial additives. So in a little bit, we'll talk about some swaps that we can make with it too. But then also things like fast foods and convenience meals, those microwavable meals like instant noodles and packaged soups and things like that. Oftentimes those are containing a high amount of sodium and preservatives and added sugars and things like that. Processed meats, excuse me, like deli meat, sausages, hot dogs, bacon, all of that stuff, they've undergone an entirely different process than a lot of the other processed food, but like curing and smoking or other preservation methods that make them contain added nitrates and just an excessive amount of sodium. So that's just something to watch out for as well. And then our sugary beverages, these are our sodas, roots, sweetened tea, energy drinks, and other sugary drinks that we might be having, maybe like sugary coffees, things like that. And these are just, as sugar indicates, just high in added sugars, artificial flavors, and coloring and all of that stuff. And then packaged sauces and condiments and things like that. So just watching out for like the salad dressings and what are the ingredients in there. Sometimes they have a high amount of like added sugars, unhealthy fats, and artificial additives and things like that. Okay. I do want to just stop for a second. I heard something. Did anybody have a question really quickly? Oh, I am not able to hear if you are asking a question. So if you have the ability to access the chat, you're certainly more welcome to put it in there, and then I can actually maybe see what the question is. But I'll address all the questions at the end of the presentation. Okay? All right. Okay, so what is a minimally processed food? So we're just flipping it around now and kind of changing the whole narrative, right? What are we wanting to strive for a little bit more? So we're gonna look for foods that are like truly their whole ingredient, food that has a single ingredient or a short list of recognizable whole foods. One easy automatic thing is that fresh produce, so like such as like fruits and vegetables, just in their natural form. They haven't been broken down or cut or anything like that. That's like kind of an easy one. Then there's also the foods that just have minimal packaging. So if you are thinking about going into the produce section of the grocery store and you see the heads of broccoli and the lettuce and all that, it's just like wide out open. There's no packaging, there's nothing. Celery has a little bit of packaging, but the top is open and all of that. So the minimal packaging is another easy one to identify, maybe a whole food or a non-processed or minimally processed food. Also, these are the things that have a little bit shorter shelf life. So they're not going to last as long in their out, like while they're on the shelf, but we've got some tips and tricks to make them last a little longer. Okay. And then these are also the things that we'll find locally sourced or at a farmer's market, something like that. You walk into the farmer's market downtown and there's a whole bunch of variety of different things and all of that to select from. So that's just kind of that natural little what are minimally processed foods and what we can be looking out for. Now let's talk about all the benefits of eating them. There's a lot, okay? So number one is these minimally processed foods are going to have, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, all of the nutrients that our body needs to function optimally. So they're just going to support our overall health and just provide us with all the things we need. So that's kind of number one, and that's really like the big like hit home message. Also, and when we were talking about highly processed foods, these foods don't necessarily have if at all, a reduced amount of additives and preservatives. So when we consume those things on a regular basis, it just poses certain health risks. There's quite a bit of research coming out about like allergic reactions and digestive issues, excuse me, increased risk of chronic diseases and adverse effects on metabolism, increased risk of cancer. There's like just whole long thing. And really when it comes down to these like fake things that are getting added into our food, we just don't really know when they're getting added in there, what's going to happen long term. And now we're starting to see some of that research come out saying that, well, maybe it's not so good. So back to the good positive stuff, okay? Improved digestion. So whole foods, like the real foods that haven't been processed and all of that stuff, they're gonna retain their natural fiber content, really, which promotes healthy digestion and contribute to the feeling of fullness. So when we talk about like eating like bulky things, like if we're eating whole fruits and vegetables, it's gonna sit in our belly and it's gonna take a lot longer for our body to digest that, and it's gonna make us feel fuller longer. And that longer digestion is good because then that means everything's absorbing and all of that into our bloodstream and being placed in our body where it should be. We'll oftentimes see better blood sugar control too. And now this is just for everybody across the board. So when we're eating things like whole grains and legumes and fresh fruits and vegetables, that has just a impact on our blood sugar levels and it keeps us more even keel throughout the day, our energy levels anyway. And just having that more stable energy level and blood sugar level throughout the day can reduce the risk of just insulin resistance issues and then also diabetes or type 2 diabetes specifically. So that's something that we want to consider for everybody. There's a whole long list of heart health benefits, which if you really think about it, cardiovascular disease and heart disease and all of that, that's like the #1 leading cause of death in Americans in the US. So really when we're trying to think about like the lifestyle behaviors that we want to adopt to minimize that risk, eating minimally processed foods is where it's at, Okay, so regularly consuming a healthy balance of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, and healthy fats just has been associated with a lower risk of the cardiovascular disease. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there too that's going to help promote that as well. So, like omega-3 fatty acids, unsaturated fats, antioxidants, a whole bunch of plant stuff in there that's good for us. And really, what that does is it just helps us reduce our cholesterol levels, reduce our inflammation, and help us reduce our blood pressure. So, lots of good stuff in there. And then finally, just to touch on weight management. So minimally processed foods are generally lower in added sugars and unhealthy fats, and lower in calorie dense ingredients compared to those highly processed foods. So they can help us support our weight management efforts just by promoting, like I talked about before, like satiety or feeling full or longer, reducing the consumption of empty calories, and then providing essential nutrients without those excess calories. So that was a lot of information. So let's just break it down again and talk about what should we choose? What should be the things that we're adding onto our plate on a regular basis, and trying to focus on this a little bit more. So fruits and vegetables, that's an obvious one, but I do want to call out something specifically. Fresh or frozen counts, okay? Even canned options count too, but we want to try and strive for that fresh or frozen if we can too, a little bit first. So when we talk about like, many of us here are living in Wisconsin or the Midwest of some sort. So our winters get a little chilly, but right now we have a plethora of fresh produce available to us, and it's often cheaper right now. And we're going to talk about cost saving options in a little bit, but really utilize those frozen options in the winter because they're in their whole form. They still have all the nutrients that our bodies need. They're just being saved for a little bit longer. We can also opt for dried or canned beans, lentils, chickpeas, and peas. Just making sure that we're choosing those things that don't have added preservatives or flavorings, because that's just one thing that we want to really make sure that we're looking at that ingredient list for and making sure that we avoid. We also can do like things like fresh or frozen fish and lean meats. Same thing. If we're buying that fresh stuff and we are not able to use it right away, then we can freeze it for later. So all of those lean meats are going to have that healthier fat option or lower saturated fat. Think about eggs, low fat, plain dairy products. So these are things like unflavored milk, yogurts, and cheese without added sugars or flavors or preservatives. One just quick side note about yogurt specifically. Yogurt can be really good for us, but we really want to make sure that we pay attention to the ingredient list in there because it can be sneaky, right? There can actually be a lot of added sugar into yogurt. So just be mindful of what you're actually purchasing and putting in your body. Plain yogurt, although it doesn't have a lot of the flavor that we're looking for, you can certainly add like fruit to it to sweeten it up and different things that you can do with it naturally to make it more sweet. But then there's also some products that you can buy that don't have added sugar in it, but still have good flavor in there. So just be mindful of what you're purchasing and just watch out. Some of those yogurts can have more sugar than like ice cream and things like that. So just be mindful, watch that ingredient list and that nutrition label. Herbs and spices are a great way to just add flavor to our meals and things like that without adding like salt and sodium and added flavors that might be artificial. And then when it comes to like actually like using like oil to cook rather than like butter or some other kind of processed oil, using like cold pressed oils like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil or sesame oil is really going to be helpful for all of us. Okay. Lots of information today. This is good. I hope we're soaking it all in. By the way, I'm recording this, so if anybody needs a recording of this afterwards, please let me know, and I'm happy to share it with you. So let's talk about some tips to reduce costs because, like financial wellness is a really big deal, and we want to make sure that we're not breaking the bank by changing up how we're buying our food and all of that. Now, I will say, there is that common like conception of those processed foods are cheaper. And when it comes down to it, yes, but it can actually be cheaper if we go to Whole Foods and just add a little preparation and planning and storage and all of that. We can really actually reduce cost with all of this. Okay, so let's talk about it a little bit. First, the biggest, I think, piece of advice that we can give is go into your meals with some kind of plan. Okay, now there's a whole variety of things that you can go and look at for this, different methods that you can use and all of that. But really, when it comes down to it, just having a plan for your meals for your week ahead, and then just creating a shopping list based off of that plan is going to help you avoid those impulse purchases at the store, and it's going to help you ensure that you're buying what you need specifically for those healthy meals that you're trying to prepare. And then also it reduces the food waste and unnecessary expenses that you could accrue by just not having a plan, and you're like, oh, I might need this or I need this. So just sitting down, taking some time to just have a plan of some sort going into your week is really going to help you prepare for this, and it is really going to help you reduce costs. And I'm going to talk about a couple more tactics with meal planning in a minute here. Buying in bulk is also a great way to lower costs. So buying in larger quantities often offers a lower price per unit of whatever you're purchasing. So in the long run, it saves you money. It might be more cost up front, but over time, it can certainly help you reduce cost. Now, this is one where we want to be creative with how we are buying in bulk. We want to make sure that we're prepared to be able to store that excess stuff that we have by either freezing or canning or something like that, so we can use later and we're not creating more food waste by buying in bulk. Also, we have all sorts of sales and discounts, so just make sure that you keep an eye on the sales and promotions. And also, like, if you are kind of one of those people that like to look at the ads and are planning off of the ads, plan your meals based off of what's on sale. Then you can really take advantage of the lower prices and really cut down on cost. We talked about seasonal produce already. Like right now, we're in abundance. We've got a lot of good stuff that's easily accessible to us and often at a lower cost. But when it comes to, like, gosh, January, February, our $2 carton of strawberries goes up to $4 and it just like doubles in price. So buying the seasonal produce and even buying it maybe in bulk right now and then freezing it and saving it for later could be a really good useful tool. Or we just stock up and get all the stuff that we need right now. We talked about this a little bit, but use frozen fruits and vegetables. They can really be budget friendly and can be a great alternative to fresh produce, and they still have all the nutrients that we need to be able to get through our day and our life and all of that. So, I mean, we talked a lot about freezing yourself, but there's also a really good cost-effective freezer section that's in the grocery store. One thing to be mindful of those like prepackaged frozen options are just make sure that there's no added sugar. And then also, like, for the frozen vegetables, they sometimes prepare them already seasoned and might have butter or something else in there. So just try and get that like real whole food rather than like something that might have added flavors in there. And then just add your own herbs and spices or whatever you might want to add to it. Finally, kind of like shopping sales and discounts, compare prices and brands. So actually, I was just thinking about like all of our different types of grocery stores that we have in our area, and all of them really do offer a generic option, which they're of equal quality, but at a lower cost to some of those other bigger brands. So definitely like compare and contrast those different brands to what might fit your budget a little bit more, and you can certainly find some ways to reduce costs that way. And then we talked about a little bit earlier about reducing food waste, but store your leftovers, freeze meals that you can use, a couple weeks from now or a month from now, something like that, or buy or plan your meals that you can use similar ingredients throughout the week. So a good example that we do with our family quite often is we found that if you buy whole chickens, it's actually cheaper than buying like packaged chicken breast. And what we end up doing is just preparing like the whole chicken, and then we may use that, like just the chicken as a meal with a couple sides, but then we take the rest and the leftovers and we use it in like fajitas a little bit later in the week, or we add it to our salads or something like that. So just being creative with maybe preparing something a little bit more in advance and then using that throughout your dishes throughout the rest of the week, that has actually really helped us reduce a lot of our costs from like actually buying poultry, for example. Finally, if you have the space and the resources and the knowledge, and actually, there's a lot of really good resources out there, but consider growing your own herbs, fruits, and vegetables, your produce, all of that. That can really be a cost-effective way to access fresh produce and just enhance your connection with food. There's a lot of people out there that really love gardening, and it's almost almost therapeutic in nature. So that's certainly an option too. And even if you don't have garden or space for that, you can start if you're interested by getting like containers, like container gardening, or just simply growing some herbs in your windowsill. There's some options there for us to get some of that. Okay, hoofda. Okay, we're gonna ask questions in a little bit. I need to add in just one little final plug here and just talk about the rest of our Be Your Best Health Education series. So thank you again for joining us on this session. We have 2 more throughout the rest of this year. We have one in October coming up about how to eat less saturated fat, just some tips and tricks on how we can choose healthy foods around that. And then in November, just in time for the holidays, and when we start having all that really good food that we're surrounded by all the time, talking about mindful eating and just a different tactic and a different way that we can approach eating all those tasty foods and doing it mindfully. So to register for that, you can do it the same way you registered for this. Otherwise, I have the link up here if you want to copy that down and register again, or you can give our office a call and we'll help you get set up. Also, I just need to put in another plug for our other live services that happen all of the time. Every Monday, we do Mindful Monday at 1:30 p.m. And the health coaches here that we have at the cooperative are going through a variety of different mindfulness techniques, gratitude and guided imagery and breathing exercises and things like that, that are just going to help us feel more relaxed, manage our stress, and get us through the rest of the day or the week and just help us feel prepared that way. We also have Fitness in a Flash, which is offered every day, and each day is offered at a different time, but it's just really encouraging us to get up and stand up from our chair and move our bodies, get our heart pumping a little bit, and get us some energy to take on the rest of our day. And then Food in a Flash is every Wednesday at 2. And we just highlight a healthy food item, talk about all the impressive health benefits, and go over some tips and tricks on how to prepare it, and then also share a recipe. Also, if you are a member of the cooperative, we offer health coaching services. So if you are trying to adopt some healthy lifestyle behaviors or change habits or anything like that, just want some extra guidance along the way of your health journey, please give us a call. We're happy to work with you. We can meet with you in person, virtual, or telephonic, whatever works best for you, but we just really want to partner with you and help you optimize your health. We also offer some lab services, so we can do cholesterol testing and blood sugar testing, A1C testing, and then we can also test your resting metabolic rate, which helps us kind of figure out how much food we need to take in a day and figure out next steps from there. So my email address is there at the bottom. If you have any questions about any of that stuff or any questions that might have come up in our session today, please email me, krose@group-health.com for more information, and I'll get you connected with whatever we can help with, okay? So we have 2 minutes left in our session here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, you can unmute your microphone. I will turn up my volume too, in case I couldn't hear anybody before. But throw some questions at me if you have any. And if you don't have any questions, and if you have to leave, thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope you have a lovely day.